I guess the thing for me is I've always been really interested in fashion. I've always enjoyed expressing myself through what I wear. And I don't even know how I came across this one label initially, but I just remember having an awareness of this brand, discovering that the sweatshirts cost about 200, 250 quid, and just thinking, well, I guess that's something I won't be able to access.
Yeah.
And then I found out that they were going to do this collaboration with H&M, and that led to this really crazy shopping experience I had.
Yeah, people are prepared to queue if they think they're going to get a bargain or they're going to be able to get one of these brands. What does that say about the way we act, as in, you know, having to have something to feel like we are part of a certain part of society?
Well, I think that has a lot to do with the fact, I mean, particularly living in London, we live in a city where advertising is quite sexy, it's quite beautiful, it's around us all the time. I mean, we're probably in the city that has, I think, you know, the most exciting and innovative advertising in the world. I make a living out of voiceover work when I'm not making theater, and that has to do with the fact that it's this huge industry. But in making these sexy ads, they make us want things, and we live in a city with enormous inequality, where regardless of where you're on the scale, you're being sold things around you all the time. And I think being someone who doesn't necessarily have access to those really glamorous things, a desire is built in you. And so when you're made to think you have this one chance to get something that you're sold all the time but not able to access, I think it inflates the desire somehow.
Yeah, the need becomes stronger. Where do you go with the production and the performance then? What is the kind of narrative, if there is one?
Well, so in the beginning, it starts with me just having this experience of queuing. But then I interviewed someone who works for a brand I'm not allowed to mention, and he challenged me to go into stores in Bond Street, because one of the things I realized as part of my desire for these brands is the fact that they belong to places I didn't feel I could go.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because despite my accent, I am actually British. I've lived in the city most of my life. But Bond Street, and particularly Old Bond Street, was this area that I was scared of, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people relate to this feeling of being terrified of these kind of boutiques. So he said, what you need to do if you really want to understand your relationship to these brands is to go in those stores. So I think the other thing that starts to happen in the course of the show is I make all these playful interventions going into stores that normally I would feel intimidated by, to find out how I can claim space as someone who can't afford to buy things in those places.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Did you get over that phobia? After going in several of these shops that you thought, actually, I don't have a place in this shop, did you suddenly think, no, actually, I do have a place, I can go in here? Or do you still feel a bit like, this is not for me?
I think it depends on the brand. Like, I remember at the beginning, one of the challenges I set myself is I was going to go into the Chanel flagship store. And even after almost a year plus working on the show, I still can't do it. I've tried to psych myself up to do it loads of times. I get as far as the door, I see the security guard, and I just double back. But otherwise, I think in general, I try to see them like gallery spaces. And in a way, it's sort of similar, because you can go into private gallery around Bond Street Way, and really they're shop fronts to sell the art. But you can go in and not buy art and just look at it. So then, why not go into clothes that you think are beautiful and just look at them?
Enjoy them that way. What does it say about us as individuals when we are nervous about going into certain places which are supposed to be public spaces? Is it the pressure we put on ourselves, or is it a societal view that actually only certain people who look a certain way can go to a certain place?
Yeah, I think we're scared of being judged. But ironically, what I found is sales assistants who work in those stores are largely the nicest, most open people you can possibly meet in retail, because their job is literally to assist in the sale, to tell you everything that you might not know just by looking at the clothes. And they want to give you the expertise that they have. And also, they don't want to risk not selling to you because they make a commission. So even if, say, you're just buying a pair of socks or something, and they never know who is necessarily going to buy and who's not, it's really more in their interest not to take the risk and be nice to everyone than it is to be rude. So I think the first thing I discovered going into these stores is that actually they weren't as intimidating when I went in as I thought. And it was mostly just the thing I was carrying within myself.
Yeah.
And I think what was powerful about that is realizing I could be in those spaces, even though I wasn't meant to be in those spaces. It made me feel empowered about going into all kinds of other situations. And it was fun. It was just like a fun game to play.
I think the idea of viewing it like a gallery is an excellent way to do, isn't it? Just talk us through the way that you like bring these stories to life on stage, because you like to use an awful lot of multi-genre as well. There's video, there is movement, obviously. You'll also have kind of stage props within it as well. Talk us how it works and how you use all of those together.
Well, I guess the thing that's maybe kind of particular to the way I work is I've worked through all kinds of different art forms. So I originally moved to London to train as a stage manager at RADA, where I also learned loads about technical theatre. I then had a filmmaking practice, and then I worked in animation for years until I started doing any of this. So I think what that means is when I start to come up with an idea, unlike maybe someone who, say, is a playwright and will write a play and then have it dramatized, I might have a video idea one day, I might have an idea for a sound piece another day, and then this time around I'd met this incredible choreographer and I wanted to work with her, and so she started to challenge me how to explore things with movement. There's also stuff in the show that might loosely be called puppetry, but I don't want to explain that too much. So I guess it's just often what happens is I get a residency through a theater, and then I just spend a lot of time in a room with a camera by myself and lots of props and lots of video and sound equipment, and I just play. And on a good day, maybe I'll get 5 minutes out of material after working for 4 or 5 hours. But if I do that over 6 months, I've got a show.
Yeah, well, the results are ready to go. Tell us where we can see The Cult of Kenzo.
So I'm going to be at Camden People's Theatre until the 9th of February, and then at Battersea Arts Centre on April 27th.